You ever feel like your shop is trying to keep secrets from you? I was working on this walnut cabinet last night, and I would have bet my best chisel the grain was running one way. Woke up this morning, looked at it in the daylight, and it's like the wood changed its mind overnight. Tears everywhere.
Tiger, I've seen your shop at night. It's not secrets, it's just physics. You're working in a cave. You've got that one bulb over the bench that looks like it was salvaged from a 1940s noir film.
It's atmospheric, Alex. Reminds me of the old timers, but you're not wrong. My eyes aren't getting any younger, and shadows are the enemy of precision. I once spent 3 hours sanding out a scratch that turned out to be the shadow of a hanging power cord.
See? That is exactly why we're doing a deep dive today. We're talking about workspace lighting. And before you start telling me about how your grandpa could carve a bird in total darkness, we're going to look at how to actually see what we're doing.
Fair enough, I'll admit, I've been a bit of a dinosaur about it. I figured if I could see the wood, I could work the wood. But there's a massive difference between seeing and observing detail.
Most people think lighting is just flip a switch, get bright. But looking at the pros, like designer Brandon Schubert or the folks at DIY Montreal, it's actually about layers. You wouldn't build a house with just one giant room, right?
Exactly. You need a hierarchy. In a shop, you got your general lighting, the stuff that keeps you from tripping over the table saw. And then you got your task lighting. That's the high octane stuff right over the blade or the assembly table.
And Schubert mentioned something interesting. Light the surfaces, not the space. In a home, that means washing a wall with light. In a shop, if you're just lighting the air between the rafters, you're wasting lumens. You want that light hitting the bench top, the tool rack, and the floor.
It's the difference between a floodlight and a spotlight. I used to have these ancient fluorescent tubes that buzzed like a hive of angry hornets. They'd take 5 minutes to warm up if it was cold out. I'd be standing there in my coat, waiting for the light to realize it was morning.
The fluorescent flicker is the fastest way to get a headache. That's why everyone is moving to LEDs. They're instant on. They don't care if it's freezing, and they don't hum.
LEDs are the greatest gift to the shop since the carbide blade. But there's a trap there too. You go to the big box store, you see shop light, you grab 6 of them, and then you get home and your workshop looks like a sterile operating room in a sci-fi movie. Everything turns blue and cold.
That's the color temperature trap. Most shop lights are 5000K or even 6500K. It's very blue. Great for staying awake, but it can be harsh. For a woodworker, doesn't that mess with how the wood actually looks?
Oh, it's a disaster. If you're finishing a piece under 5000K blue-white light, and then the client puts it in their living room with 2700K warm lamps, well, that rich mahogany suddenly looks like it was painted with mud. I try to aim for 4000K in the shop. It's what I call honest light. It's crisp enough to see your pencil marks, but it doesn't make the wood look like a piece of plastic.
And it's not just the temperature, right? It's the CRI color rendering index.
Now we're getting into the secret sauce. CRI is basically a score of how true colors look under the light. Most cheap shop lights are around 80. That's okay. But if you can find lights with a CRI of 90 or higher, the reds and grains in the wood just pop. It's like the difference between a standard TV and a 4K screen. You start seeing the subtle transitions in the grain that 80 CRI light just flattens out.
So, if I'm setting up a new space, how do I avoid the rookie mistake of just plastering the ceiling with recessed cans or shop lights?
You gotta map it out. Think about your shadows. If you have one big light directly behind you while you're at the workbench, you're basically working in your own eclipse. Your head and shoulders are blocking the very thing you're trying to see.
So you want cross lighting?
Exactly. You want light coming from at least 2 angles. I like to run my lights parallel to the bench, but slightly in front of where I stand. That way the light reaches over my shoulder. And linkable LEDs are a dream for this. You can chain 4 or 5 of them together and run them off one outlet.
But wait, there's a warning in the Pack Lights guide about that. You can't just chain 50 lights together. There's a limit.
Believe me, I've tried to push the limits of a circuit before. You start smelling warm copper and you know you've made a mistake. Usually, you can link 4 to 6 of those 4-foot LED fixtures. Check the box, because if you overlink them, the first light in the chain takes all the heat and the last one looks like a tired firefly.
Beyond the ceiling, what about the little lights? Schubert mentioned table lamps and floor lamps for the home. But what's the shop equivalent?
Gooseneck lamps on the machines. Period. If I'm at the drill press, I want a dedicated light pointing exactly where the bit meets the wood. Most built-in machine lights are, let's just say they're an afterthought. They're like a pen light in a hurricane. I like a magnetic base LED that I can slap onto the cast iron table. It lets me see the layout lines without having to stick my nose 3 inches from a spinning blade.
Please don't do that. I like your nose where it is.
It's survived this long. But seriously, if you can't see the kerf, the path of the blade, you're just guessing. And guessing is how you end up with a pile of expensive firewood.
What about the psychological side? The Lux Logic Guide mentions that lighting isn't just about the task. It's about satisfaction and staying sharp. If you're in a dingy garage, you're going to get tired faster.
Man, that is the truth. There's a mental tax to working in bad light. Your brain is working overtime just to interpret what the eyes are seeing. By 4 p.m., you're exhausted, and you think it's because you've been standing all day, but half of it is just eye strain. When I finally upgraded my shop lighting, it felt like I'd had an extra cup of coffee. Everything felt more doable.
So, if we're giving the listeners a starter kit for a better shop, where do they begin? Do they rip everything out and start over?
No, don't go tearing down the drywall just yet. Start with your main bench. Get a 2-pack of linkable LEDs and hang them so the light overlaps right where you work.
And check the temperature?
Aim for 4,000 K to 5,000 K for work areas. If you have a chill area where you sit and sketch or look at plans, maybe go 3,000 K there to let your brain downshift a bit. And for the love of all things holy, get some task lights for your stationary tools. A $20 magnetic light on your bandsaw will change your life more than a $200 blade will.
What about dimmers? Schubert is a huge fan of dimmers in the home. Does that work in the shop?
I don't need to set the mood for my table saw, Alex. Tonight, we're cutting Baltic birch by candlelight. But honestly, for assembly and finishing, dimming can actually help you see imperfections like witness marks or uneven finish. Sometimes high noon brightness hides the ripples that a lower, raking light will expose.
That makes sense. It's about being able to change the perspective.
Right, lighting is just another tool. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to set a finishing nail. You shouldn't use a stadium floodlight to check a dovetail fit.
Total honesty time. What's the biggest shop light disaster you've actually had?
Years ago, I was rushing a project. My shop lighting was so bad, I decided to use a handheld halogen work light. You know, the ones that get hot enough to melt lead? I propped it up on a plastic bucket to get the perfect angle while I was staining.
Oh no.
Oh yes. I got so focused on the staining that I didn't notice the smell of melting plastic. The light melted through the bucket, tipped over, and ignited a rag soaked in mineral spirits. I spent the next 10 minutes playing firefighter with a shop vac, which was also a mistake, by the way, until I finally found the extinguisher.
Tiger, you're a walking safety hazard.
I learned 2 things that day. First, halogens are basically portable suns and should be treated with fear. Second, if you can't see what you're doing with the lights on the ceiling, your setup is broken, don't improvise with fire lamps.
I think that's the perfect takeaway. If you have to bring a handheld light to see your work, your shop isn't finished yet.
Exactly. Build your lighting like you build a cabinet. Strong bones on the ceiling, fine details on the bench, and enough layers to make it work from every angle.
And maybe keep the fire extinguisher a little closer next time.
Always. It's the brightest thing in the shop for a reason.
Next time, we're talking about dust collection. Because once you can see the dust with your new lights, you're going to realize just how much of it you're breathing.
Oh, don't get me started. I've got stories about that involve a leaf blower and a very angry neighbor.
Till then, keep your lights bright and your fingers clear.
See you in the den.